Welcome again to Getting to Work, the podcast of NCI Works. I'm John Spencer from Starved Rock Media with a very special guest today, Ross Szabo. Hi, Ross.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. I met you at the Starved Rock Rural Mental Health Awareness Conference not long ago. Uh, Ross is the wellness director at Geffen Academy at UCLA. His curriculum is right now used by over a quarter of a million people. Is that right?
Definitely. Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank
Obviously, making a big difference when it comes to mental health. Ross is the author of a kid's book about anxiety, which was featured on Oprah's Favorite Things, and this book, which I'm slow rolling through, guide for young adults to take charge of their mental health. He's got a great story about his own mental health journey, which I think I'll ask him to share just to get us rolling today. Hello again, Ross Szabo.
Thanks so much for having me. Where do you want to start with mental health? That's always the
Oh
fun
my gosh,
question.
where do you start? Uh, you're the expert. Where do you start? I would ask you to start by sharing your story because it's so amazingly powerful, and I think it will help many people who may be struggling themselves even.
The personal story is typically the place to start. Whether you're an employer, an employee, whatever age you are, the story of mental health usually begins with your own journey and also your family's journey, right? And so I was born into a family that had severe mental health disorders and addiction. Three of my grandparents were alcoholics. My mom has bipolar disorder, and my parents did the best they could to raise me. They certainly raised me completely differently than the home that they were raised in with their alcoholic parents. But the biological predisposition is hard to beat. It's hard to get away from. It's hard to undo. And so I often joke with people, it wasn't a question of if I was going to have a mental health disorder. It was more like, which one was it going to be? And
Which one?
when when was it going to come out? And unfortunately, I went through a lot of trauma and loss between the ages 11 and 12, and then was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 16. I always tell people a diagnosis is important, but what you've done before that diagnosis is as important. And unfortunately, I had learned to hide my emotions from a very young age, and started drinking alcohol also at a young age, around age 12. And so when I got diagnosed, the patterns that I was most familiar with was hiding and drinking. I learned to drink alcohol before I learned to talk about my feelings. And so as I went through the rest of my journey, went through a massive state of depression at age 17, attempted to take my own life, was in and out of psychiatric wards and different colleges for the next 4 years, until my true rock bottom moment, which was around age 22, when I just had given up and just didn't care what happened to me anymore. The theme there is always going to be where is your family history? Where did it come from? And then what are you doing about it? And unfortunately, before age 22, I wasn't doing anything remotely positive or healthy. I was functioning. I appeared to be a successful contributing member of society.
I was going to
But
say, and I think, not to interrupt, Ross, but I think a lot of people are surprised, perhaps, to find out that someone who you were a successful athlete, you were going to school and doing okay in the classroom as well, but yet struggling mightily.
and I think, unfortunately, John, though, that's the reality of the average workplace today. I think there are many people who are pushing through, trying to get through the next day, showing up and performing. One, because sometimes work is an outlet, it's an escape from everything else that's happening in your family, happening in society, happening with all the changes you have. And then also, it's a sense of validation, right? Like, if your whole life is broken everywhere else, at least you have this one thing that is still giving you a sense of purpose. And not that every job is a sense of purpose for people, but for a lot of people it is.
Sure.
It's a source of income, it's a source of other things. And so I think for me, when I was going through the depths of all of that, I was just trying to get through the next day. And I really thought the next day would be the day it gets better. And obviously that wasn't the case for me. But, I think the bigger message from my personal story is that a lot of people maybe don't go through everything I went through, but they go through a lot in that phase of like brain growth from 12 to 25. And, I joke a lot that being an adult is often either undoing adolescence or reliving adolescence, depending on your level of self awareness. And so, if anyone went through anything remotely close to what I did, they go into their adult lives with a series of coping mechanisms that may or may not work for them, a unfortunate way of communication that may involve them hiding or doing things. And what we see now is that adult mental health crisis is worse than the youth mental health crisis, and businesses are really struggling to figure out what to do with it.
Someone said, and I believe it was at our conference, may have been you, but mental health literally starts with me. And I think before you start to deal with anyone else, you do have to start with yourself, right?
You definitely do, because if you're not aware of what you are contributing, if you're not aware of what you are bringing to your job or to your family or to your friendships all the time, then it's going to be really hard for anyone else to point it out. I don't know about you, but I have never seen much success with someone going up to someone else and pointing out their issues and having that person be like, "You're right. I have so many issues. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm
I'll
totally
go
going to
work
work
on
on
those
it."
things right now. Do you see anything else? Let me know. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I
not
mean,
at
even
all.
in a relationship, it can take years, decades for someone to feel comfortable enough with their spouse or partner or whoever being like, "Hey, I need you to work on this," and then not being instantly defensive and being like, "You're wrong."
So part of this, I think, for me at least, is recognizing that everyone's struggling with something and normalizing mental health. It is just like physical health, truly, and should be recognized on the same level. And getting rid of the stigma of, ooh, he's got mental health issues, which somehow makes him or her less than, and being able to discuss them and then figure out how to work through it. What's the first step as far as who do you talk to? I guess if you think you've got a problem.
I I agree with everything you're saying. I just think that a lot of companies and businesses are in a tough spot with that because they have all kinds of HR programs and all kinds of support for physical health. And they have a healthcare system that supports physical health. And they have clear guidelines on what to do if someone has a broken leg or gets diagnosed with something that's difficult. So, to your question, what do you do if you notice anything? It is to seek help from mental health professionals or from someone that is available. And, based on the area that people live in or the resources that are available, it may be more limited than other places. So that can be hard. That can, though, especially from a business place, like give you the paperwork or the diagnoses or things like that need support at work. What's tougher is when someone comes into work and says they have X, Y, and Z issue. There's no documentation for it. And now the employer is just trying to adjust to what could seem like a personality trait, but could actually be something that's protected under the American with Disabilities Act, right? And
Right.
so I think that ultimately a lot of businesses are just in a really wide gray area right now where they care about their employees. They want people to show up, where other people care about their coworkers and want to help. But to your point, we don't have a clear way to do it. We don't have a systemic or systematic way to actually support mental health in the workplace.
So, as the expert guest here, what is the best first step for someone who is managing at work and trying to help, but yet is in this big gray area and doesn't want to overstep, but also wants to be supportive and helpful?
So we say all the time that mental health is like physical health, and obviously I agree with that. The difference is when I say physical health or you say physical health, we know what it means. You know that physical health is exercise, eating right, knowing your family history, taking care of your body. Currently, mental health means everything from, schizophrenia to going to the spa and getting a massage. And that's not going to work until we have a clear language that we're using. We're always going to be reactive. We're never going to be in front of this. We're never going to be proactive. And so one thing that I always recommend is just having a clear definition of what mental health even is. For a lot of people, mental health seems to be like having a problem, but mental health isn't actually having a problem. Mental health is having a core set of skills or a core set of baseline that allows you to address challenges in your life. So if you think about physical health, most people do at least pay attention to what they eat, how much they exercise or how active they are, what their family history is, and what they need to do to take care of their body. And that is what you would say is the baseline for physical health. Now, there are many times where someone may go through a physical health issue that they need more support. They need medication, they need a doctor, they need regular checkups, they need all of that. We need to do the same thing with mental health. And if businesses can do that as the baseline, then everything that flows off of it supports that baseline. So the baseline for mental health is obviously knowing your family history is really important. Knowing where you came from, what you're prone to, what could happen is important. But beyond that, it does require you to have some coping mechanisms, whether they are, simplistic, like you just listen to music, you go for a walk, you talk to friends, something like that. But one of the cornerstones is coping mechanisms. And then a part of it is communication. Communication varies. A lot of people need help with it. Some people are great at it, but that is a cornerstone of your mental health. The next piece is relationships, and it doesn't have to be romantic, but just like, what are the relationships in your life? And then that last part is, how do you take care of your mind? And if you have those kind of core elements, then what companies can do is see like, okay, how do we support these core elements for our employees? How do we talk about it? How do we frame it? And how do we move forward? Without that conversation though, and without that clear definition, like I said, we're just in a gray area trying to respond to crises or to problems instead of being preventative and proactive.
Yeah. Oh, all great points. Um, Online resources becoming more and more available, and I think people are becoming more comfortable with going there. And in our rural area, in particular, it's a great option because we frankly don't have a lot of brick and mortar places we can even go if we wanted to for mental health. Any places in particular from a macro level, I guess, that you would recommend that we start?
There are a lot of online therapy options now, and I don't support one over the other. I think that going to therapy or getting treatment online is a really individual choice, and I think people need to evaluate what's appropriate. I also think businesses can vet that and look at it. HR teams can say like, hey, here are some options if you want online therapy because we don't have as much support in this rural area. But the COVID era really kind of fast forwarded online therapy, being on Zoom or being in these other places, and it's definitely an option, and it works. It's as effective as in-person therapy. So I don't promote like one group over the other, but there are now kind of hundreds of online therapy groups. And to your point, how to address it in business, I think there are a lot of times where I talk to managers who an employee shares or discloses something with them that they're not sure how to handle. And they don't have the support or resources that they know that they need. So even if businesses can come up with a list of like, hey, here's what you can do, here's how you can talk about this, because at least a lot of my friends are in situations now where one of the people they manage has shared something and they don't even know how to navigate it. And they're like, well, do I give them work now because they shared this thing? Do I not? Like, what do I do? It's tough.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Thanks so much for your time today. Your website has contact information, of course. What is it?
Yeah, my website's just my name, rossszabo.com.
Okay. You're helping more than 250,000 people with your curriculum and many, many more. Your children's book about anxiety is, of course, available. And I do recommend Behind Happy Faces, too, which is available wherever fine books are sold, I'm sure.
It is. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all you're doing for mental health and for sharing your story. And congratulations on overcoming. And I'm sure it's something you still have to work on every day, just like going to the gym, right?
Yes, definitely. I think I've learned the hard lessons of the trap where you think like, oh yeah, I figured out my mental health, and then you have not.
Yeah. And then one day you go, no. As it turns out, no, I haven't. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time, Ross. Great to see you again.
Thanks.
Ross Szabo on this edition of Getting to Work, the podcast of NCI Works. You can see and listen to others and find out everything about employment in North Central Illinois. Just go to nciworks.org.